Callum Bridger had been teaching third grade for 6 years, and he thought he'd seen every variation of unusual student behavior. The kid who only spoke in dinosaur facts. The one who organized her crayons by electromagnetic wavelength. The child who was convinced the class hamster was plotting against him. But Pip was different in ways that nagged at the edges of Callum's awareness like a song he couldn't quite place. The child looked about 7, with dark hair and eyes that were just slightly too large for the face, giving an appearance of perpetual wonder. Pip was unfailingly polite, eerily quiet, and had a way of speaking that sounded like someone translating from a very formal language. Over weeks, small oddities accumulated. Pip never ate lunch, always claiming to have eaten earlier, but Callum never saw evidence of food. The child could read passages in what looked like Arabic or Mandarin but definitely wasn't, flowing across the page in Pip's notebook during free time. And sometimes, when Pip thought no one was watching, the child forgot to blink for minutes at a time. One rainy October afternoon, Callum found Pip alone in the classroom after dismissal, staring at a math worksheet with an expression of intense frustration that looked almost painful. "You okay?" Callum asked, pulling up a chair. Pip looked up and something in those two large eyes seemed to break. "I am not supposed to tell humans, but I do not understand your base 10 system. We use base 12 at home. My mother says I must adapt, but it makes no sense. Why do you group by tens when you have 12 moon cycles and 12 months? Your system is internally inconsistent." Callum blinked. "Where is home, exactly?" Pip's expression became very serious. "Kepler 442b, approximately 1,200 of your light years from here. We have been on Earth for 8 months studying human education systems. I am the test subject. My mother is the principal researcher." Before Callum could formulate a response that made any sense, Pip added, "You are my favorite human. You explain things without making me feel deficient. My mother has been observing your teaching methods through my neural link. She finds you compelling. That is her word. Compelling." Callum laughed nervously, certain this was some elaborate game invented by a child with too much imagination and too few friends. "That's quite a story, Pip. Very creative. I am not creating fiction." Pip's skin flickered, just for a second, going translucent enough that Callum saw bone structure underneath that absolutely was not human. "I am Caelthier. We are here to assess humanity's readiness for contact, and you are teaching me more about your species than any data collection protocol ever could." Callum spent a sleepless night convincing himself he'd imagined the translucent skin, the impossible bone structure, all of it. But the next day Pip was still there, still strange, still watching him with those two large eyes that reflected light at the wrong angles. And Callum found himself unable to treat the child any differently. If Pip was human, they needed a teacher who cared. If Pip was actually an alien studying humanity, well, same principle applied. Over the following weeks, Pip started staying after school regularly. The other children didn't play with the weird, quiet kid, and Callum's heart ached watching Pip eat lunch alone, so he made extra effort to include them in group activities, to explain homework with patience, to ask about their interests. These after-school conversations became the strangest part of Callum's day. Pip would ask questions like, "Why do humans cry when they are happy? Why do you create art that serves no survival function? Why did you choose to teach children when you could have pursued more profitable endeavors?" And Callum, despite the surreal nature of it all, found himself giving honest answers he'd never quite articulated before. "I teach because watching a kid finally understand something they've been struggling with is better than any paycheck. We make art because surviving isn't the same as living. We cry when we're happy because emotions are complicated and sometimes they overflow." Pip absorbed every answer with intense focus, sometimes tilting their head at angles human necks didn't quite manage. One afternoon, while helping Callum grade spelling tests, Pip said casually, "My mother watches all our conversations. She is responsible for determining whether humanity should be contacted officially or left in isolation until you develop faster-than-light travel on your own." It could be centuries. Callum's pen stopped moving. What criteria is she using? Capacity for empathy toward beings unlike yourselves? Ability to value growth over conquest? Willingness to help without expectation of reward? Pip smiled, an expression that looked almost human except for being slightly too wide. "You are performing excellently." She has submitted 3 favorable reports already. Then, with perfect childhood innocence, Pip added, "Also, she thinks you have nice eyes. She said I should not tell you that part, but I do not understand why compliments should be kept secret." Callum choked on his coffee and spent the next 10 minutes wondering if he was being evaluated for first contact or something else entirely. The revelation that an alien civilization was judging humanity based partly on how he taught fractions was surreal enough. The added complication that the researcher apparently found him attractive made everything feel like a fever dream. Callum tried to act normal, but he was hyper-aware that everything he did was being observed by someone he'd never met who held Earth's future in her hands. Then one evening 3 weeks later, he was approached in the nearly empty school parking lot by a woman he'd never seen before. She was tall, with those same two large eyes and long ears that curved back from her temples in elegant arcs. Her skin had a subtle opalescence that human skin didn't possess, and she moved with precision that looked almost choreographed. "I am Kieran," she said, her voice carrying the same formal precision as Pip's but lower, musical Pip's mother. "I apologize for the unauthorized observation, but my assessment protocols required extended study of human behavior in educational contexts. However, my child has become attached to you, and that was not anticipated in my mission parameters." She clasped her hands tightly, and Callum noticed they were trembling slightly. "Pip is lonely. Our species does not produce many children, and bringing them on research missions is highly unusual. I thought exposure to human education would be beneficial for both Pip's development and my research, but I underestimated how much they would need genuine connection. You have provided that." She met his eyes, and Callum saw vulnerability there that transcended species. "You treat Pip with patience and respect, not because you know they are alien, but because you treat all your students this way. This tells me more about humanity's capacity for compassion than any data I could collect through passive observation." Callum found his voice. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Pip disclosed my assessment findings to you. And because they told you I find you compelling," which was unauthorized disclosure of personal observations that should never have been included in official reports. Her skin flushed a pale copper color. "I have been on Earth for 8 months studying your species, and you are the first human who has made me question whether observation is sufficient, whether I want to do more than watch from a distance." She took a careful breath. "My reports will determine if Earth receives first contact within your lifetime or is left isolated for potentially centuries. But I find myself compromised. How can I file objective assessments when I spend my evenings reviewing recordings of you reading stories to children and feeling something I have no scientific protocol for?" Callum stared at this alien woman who'd been watching him for months, who was responsible for humanity's first contact timeline, who was standing in a parking lot admitting she'd developed feelings while spying on his teaching methods. The situation was absurd. It was also maybe the most honest conversation he'd had in years. "What do you want?" he asked. "To stay in contact beyond mission parameters, as myself, not just as an observer. Pip needs stability, needs to know their attachment to you is not just data collection. And I need to understand why one human teacher has affected me so profoundly that I am questioning protocols that have governed Kelthir research for millennia." She looked at him with those impossible eyes. "May I?" Callum, feeling like he was stepping off a cliff into something vast and strange, nodded. Yes, let's figure this out." Over the following months, something unexpected grew. Pip thrived with actual friendship, bringing Callum drawings of their homeworld and asking increasingly complex questions about human emotion. Kieran slowly let her professional distance dissolve, meeting Callum for coffee while Pip did homework, discussing philosophy and culture and the weight of responsibility she carried. Her reports would shape policy for billions of beings across multiple worlds, determine whether humanity got invited to the galactic community or left alone for centuries. The pressure was immense, but she told Callum that he'd already given her the answer she needed. When her final assessment was due, Kieran submitted something unprecedented. Humanity should receive contact not because of technological readiness, but because they possessed something her advanced species had optimized away. The ability to care for others simply because they needed caring for, even when it was inconvenient, even when it offered no benefit. She cited Callum's treatment of Pip, his patience with struggling students, his choice to teach for meaning rather than profit. The Kelthir Council debated for weeks, then accepted her recommendation. Earth received its first official contact 6 months later. During the global celebrations, Kieran found Callum in the crowd and admitted quietly that her compromise wasn't professional weakness but clarity. She'd fallen for him because he represented what humanity did best, choosing compassion when logic didn't demand it, helping simply because someone needed help. Pip, watching their mother and teacher finally acknowledge what everyone could see, grinned with that too wide smile and said loudly,